I'd like to call Committee of the Whole to order. Committee of the Whole has under consideration Bill 41, the Wildlife Amendment Act 2025. We are currently on Amendment A1 as moved by the Honourable Member for Banff-Kananaskis. Are there any members wishing to speak to the Amendment A1? The Honourable Minister of Forestry and Parks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm proud to rise again today to speak to my colleagues about Bill 41, the Wildlife Amendment Act 2025, and address some misconceptions. This bill is about making smart, practical updates to how we manage wildlife in Alberta. It's focused on helping hunters, supporting ethical practices, and making sure our laws keep up with the times, especially when it comes to technology, enforcement, and alignment with federal laws. Unfortunately, much of the debate we've heard so far hasn't actually been about what's in the bill. So let's be clear, Bill 41 does not make any changes to bear hunting. It does not create a, quote, open season, as we've heard. It does not allow people to hunt grizzly bears. What members opposite are referring to is a separate policy that deals with conflict bears, bears that pose a real danger to people or livestock. In rare cases, when a bear is aggressive or causing serious problems, a trained Albertan may be called in as a last resort to deal with that specific animal. That is not a hunt. That is not a sport. It's about protecting people and property. And for the record, this policy has been in place for nearly a year and not a single grizzly bear has been harvested yet. So maybe the members opposite can define what an open season means to them. But the members opposite, they know that this policy follows the same guidelines as exists for Fish and Wildlife officers when it comes to destroying a problem bear. So it can't add to any more destruction that's already happening on the landscape now. As for cougars, again, this has nothing to do with Bill 41. But since it came up, I'll say this. We've expanded the number of cougar management areas to better track and manage populations. And even with those changes, our quotas are still lower than what the previous government allowed. In 2018-2019, the NDP approved a quota for 167 cougars. That's 95 males and 72 females, with quotas as high as 18 cougars in one area. In the 2 years prior to that, their quotas were 155 cougars each year, 86 males and 69 females. Compare that today, under our government, the total quota is 132 across nearly twice the area as when the NDP were in power. And we all know the importance of having a healthy cougar population across the province, but when the NDP were in power, I guess they didn't care at that time. Now that we've addressed what this bill is not about, I'd like to take a look at the amendment proposed for it, Amendment A1. Now, going by some of the comments from the member from Banff-Kananaskis, I'll just read from her comments. The first section is that the classes of animals listed will have a tag issued to them. That's trophy sheep and goat, moose, elk, white-tailed deer, mule deer, antelope, bison, non-trophy sheep, black bear, and grizzly bear, cougar, and wild turkey. Each of those classes of wildlife will have a number of tags associated to them. So that's kind of the take, I guess you could say. Well, I guess what I would say on that one is I'm guessing that the member opposite wants to see an actual grizzly bear hunt, because now she's suggesting that we need to have tags allocated for each of these species, including grizzly bears. So that's an interesting take right off the start. She goes on to say, the next section of the amendment is that the total number of tags issued by the minister will be based on certain criteria. The first one is that the total number of tags will be based on, quote, the best available scientific data analysis regarding population dynamics, habitat capacity, and conservation status of the class of wildlife animal, end quote. And B, will consult with independent wildlife biologists and other stakeholders as the minister considers appropriate. Well, Madam Chair, we already are doing this when it comes to looking at available scientific data, talking to people across the province, listening to stakeholders, and but I was kind of curious about what independent wildlife biologists, I'm not sure how we find who or where all these independent wildlife biologists are as far as talking to them, but just for the record, I have talked to independent wildlife biologists in the past, actually the past couple of weeks even, about some of our, the numbers and what we need to do for managing wildlife. What wasn't listed in there, of course, was First Nations, and we discussed these things with First Nations too. So I think by listing all these things specifically, there's some things that this amendment leaves out. Now, Amendment A1 proposes setting tag numbers based on what the member opposite would consider data, habitat, mortality rates, and making that data public. These are all matters that are not included in the scope of the bill, but moreover, many of these suggestions are not fully measured or already implemented into practice. The member spoke about considering mortality rates when determining tags, but I'd like to point out the following in the amendment proposed. It says, quote, "For each class of wildlife animal, the minister must, no later than September 30th of each calendar year, determine the maximum number of tags that may be issued under Section 14 in the following calendar year." So, as the members should know, this would not be possible to abide to, as the number of mentioned mortalities happen over the cold winter months. And an especially cold winter could mean significantly higher mortalities. So Madam Chair, when we look at the wildlife numbers, we always look at the numbers in the wintertime when there's snow so that we can count the numbers, either helicopter surveys or on-the-ground surveys. But by determining the numbers for the following year by September 30th, we missed that opportunity to gather that information that we need to make the proper decisions when it comes to numbers. So each year the number of tags are determined after winter and after we've had a chance to see how mortalities have impacted population numbers. Determining tags prior to the winter months could be dangerously harmful to animal populations, and I would suggest it'd be irresponsible, Madam Chair. The amendment goes on to say, in determining the maximum number of tags that may be issued, the minister must do the following: consider the best available scientific data analysis regarding population dynamics, habitat capacity, and conservation status of the class of wildlife animal, and consult with independent wildlife biologists and other stakeholders as a minister considers appropriate. Madam Chair, we already do that. Every year we base tag numbers on the best available science, including population size, habitat conditions, and natural mortality. We consult biologists, we talk to First Nations, we talk to stakeholders and local experts before setting quotas. And I'd also like to point out that the member's amendment also fails to mention, again, First Nations, discussions with them. The amendment continues, no later than September 30th of each calendar year, the minister must publish the following information on a publicly available website, the department administered by the minister. The number of tags issued in respect to each class of wildlife animal during the previous calendar year. So, Madam Chair, we actually already published all these tag numbers ahead of time. We're publishing right now what's coming up for the draw season that's coming up. And if you can look back on the website and you can see the past numbers for going back multiple years, probably 10 or 15 years even. So again, the September deadline would not be possible as we must consider the impacts of winter on animal populations. But aside from that, we already do that as well. Tags issued are publicly listed, and much of the data used to make our decisions is easily accessible on Open Alberta or through published studies. While it may sound helpful, this amendment is redundant and frankly a step backwards. We already use science, we already follow careful processes, we already consider animal mortality. We also make decisions after all the information is available. Unlike this amendment proposes by forcing an early fall decision. And this amendment would force irresponsible management, Madam Chair. And we also consider input from First Nations, which is this amendment fails to mention again. Those reasons are why I cannot support this proposed amendment. With that said, I hope my colleagues can join me in supporting Bill 41 as it is about practical focus changes, but not support this amendment. The Bill 41 helps modernize our laws, improves enforcement, supports ethical hunting, and brings our rules in line with federal regulations and modern technology. It matters to hunters, to fish and wildlife and conservation officers, to rural families, and to anyone who wants to see responsible and ethical wildlife management in Alberta. Thank you very much.
Are there any other members that wish to join the debate on Amendment A1? Seeing none, I will call the question on Amendment A1. It's moved by the Honourable Member for Banff-Kananaskis. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. The amendment is defeated. We'll be back on the main bill. No amendments before us. Any members wishing to join the debate? The Honourable Member for Banff-Kananaskis.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity to speak to Bill 41 one more time here. I just want to express my disappointment in the members opposite not being able to support the application of science and wildlife management. That's what this amendment was going to do. This amendment was designed to do two things: make sure that wildlife management decisions were based in science, and to make sure that that data is publicly available. The members opposite just voted against both. And so in that one move, the members opposite have voted against the use of science in wildlife decision-making. The minister likes to play games with words, Madam Speaker, and he likes to act as if this is just me, the MLA for Banff-Kananaskis, speaking on my own and just making things up out of thin air. Nothing could be further from the truth, Madam Speaker. The minister speaks about misconceptions from this side of the aisle. Yeah, I'm here all week. The minister likes to speak about misconceptions on this side of the aisle, but I would challenge him to have a consideration of his own or the UCP's own misconceptions. This bill does not open a hunt for bears, but what it doesn't do is guarantee the application of science in determining the number of trapping and hunting quotas and tags. The minister spent a lot of time just then talking about September 30th as a date and how that doesn't work. Oh no, it couldn't work because we can't just talk about it in the future. We can't talk about it in the past. Okay, fine, whatever, change the date. I'm not super married to September 30th. That could have been an amendment, but it wasn't. They shot it down. And that's because the minister and the UCP have no interest in providing transparency and accountability or using science in wildlife-based management decision-making, Madam Speaker, and that's what's really disappointing here today. The minister said that the data is already published. Well, I beg to differ, because over the last year, I've heard the minister shout out random numbers about the number of grizzly bears there are in Alberta, and none of those numbers match the actual recovery plan, which is the most recent data that we have on population estimates of bears. Several of the decisions the minister has made in the last year go against existing government species management plans, like for cougars, like for fur bears, like for grizzly bear recovery plan. I went all over this when I presented this amendment last week. There's a reason why I proposed this amendment, Madam Speaker, and that's because there is no data informing these management decisions. And I know that I also have talked to independent biologists, and all of them are gravely concerned about the decisions that the minister has made. Some of them are so concerned that earlier today, a couple organizations released an open letter to the minister where they asked him to rescind the decisions to double female cougar quotas, adding 6 additional cougar management areas and setting quotas in these new areas to non-zero numbers, expanding the minister's special license species and seasons, particularly for at-risk species like mountain goats, allowing public hunting of problem grizzly bears, a threatened species, and lifting quotas on sensitive fur-bearing animals like wolverines, fishers, Canada lynx, and river otters. And why do you think, Madam Speaker, that these groups and the scientists who have provided them with data are asking the minister to rescind these decisions? They're asking the minister to rescind these decisions because they're not based on science. That the science from biologists in this province who have devoted their careers to understanding these animals have actually found data that contradicts every single one of these ministers' decisions. And so it is gravely concerning, not just to me, but for the thousands of Albertans who have emailed me asking how this minister can be making these decisions not based on wildlife science. I'll be honest with you, Madam Speaker, it's one of the reasons why I became an MLA was to bring wildlife science to the floor of the legislature. And so I'm thankful to the minister for that opportunity to yet again champion the need for sound, robust science informing wildlife management decision-making and policies. While this Bill 41 does not contain this excellently worded amendment to ensure science is used and big data is publicly released, the bill itself does implement actions that will affect wildlife populations. When we increase hunting and trapping opportunities, while I think that that's great, more people should get outside and appreciate the great wilderness that Alberta has to offer. But while we're making that decision and we're also making it easier for people to hunt and trap, that's also fine. Couple that with totally unsustainable hunting and trapping quotas for several species at risk, and you have a problem. You've got more people interested in more people going out onto the landscape to engage in this form of recreation and subsistence, and yet we also have removals of tag limits and trapping limits. The minister correctly pointed out that still under the NDP government, there were more cougar tags than there are under this UCP government. I'll just say, sure. I mean, that was 6 years ago. I think we've learned a little bit more since then. And you would think, Madam Speaker, that 6 years would be long enough for the UCP to get it right. But clearly, it is not. The minister has suggested that lifting trapping quotas is good for data collection. Utter nonsense. An animal in a trap doesn't tell you how many animals are out there. It just tells you how many animals you've trapped. Give me a break. The minister likes to talk about it as if it's like what the member opposite would consider to be data. I'd just like to take this time, Madam Speaker, to let you know that science is not an ideology. It is not something that you believe in. It is not something that you have faith in. That's the creator or whoever you choose to believe in your faith. Science has nothing to do with faith, Madam Speaker. It is data. Data doesn't have feelings, data doesn't have opinions, and it doesn't have objectives. It is data. It is what people do with that data. That's when it turns into politicizing something that is never meant to be political. Wildlife management should not be political, Madam Speaker. It should be based on data. And in this particular minister's case, it is not. And it is for that reason, and also some questions around the ethics and conflict of interest that this minister has exhibited, that some people are even emailing me asking for the minister to resign, Madam Speaker. Some people are so upset about this minister's approach to wildlife management, they don't even think he should be Minister of Forestry and Parks anymore. I would be upset if many Albertans didn't think I was doing a good enough job and wanted me to step down. You'd think that that would be a little bit more impactful for some people in the House, Madam Speaker. Lastly, I'll just say the minister has accused me of not considering and consulting with First Nations. And again, Madam Speaker, nothing could be further from the truth. I have 2 First Nations in my riding. I proudly meet with and talk with them regularly. I proudly meet with and talk with Indigenous leaders across Alberta regularly. And we have 2 on this side of the House that I proudly meet with and talk about regularly. Minister is correct that First Nations were not listed in this amendment, and they should have been. And I will own that. I will say, yes, First Nations should have been listed. But there were many other stakeholders who weren't listed. And the only other thing I'll add to that, Madam Speaker, is that as far as I can tell, the only stakeholders the minister has actually consulted with on his hunting and trapping limits is hunters and trappers. There's a whole lot of other stakeholders out there that have an interest in wildlife management in Alberta, and they were not consulted on this. Experts, independent biologists, Albertans, citizens, recreationists, people who don't hunt and trap. The reality is that hunters and trappers, although they have very much an important role to play in this conversation, are not the only people in Alberta who are interested in wildlife. And those other people also deserve to be consulted. And I also know, Madam Speaker, that First Nations were not consulted on Bill 41 because I asked them. So don't tell me that I don't consult with First Nations. At the end of the day, Madam Speaker, the UCP government has decided to vote against the application of science in wildlife management. I find that shameful. We could do so much better by our Alberta wildlife, and we are actively choosing not to. Thank you.
Any other members to join the debate? The Honourable Minister of Forestry and Parks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just have to, I guess, make a few comments on here. She talked about there were some misconceptions in the amendment. The September 30th date wasn't a misconception. I mean, it's clearly written in there multiple times, September 30th. So that part of the amendment alone shows complete disrespect for using science to make decisions managing wildlife, because you can't gather the data you need to make decisions by making the decision before you gather the data. So that shows not only a complete disrespect for the using data to manage wildlife, but a complete lack of knowledge about wildlife management. And the member opposite considers this an excellent amendment. Well, it's far from being an excellent amendment. So when we talk about the female quotas on cougars, for instance, the member opposite, I mean, I just went through the numbers. The numbers are the numbers. As far as in 2018 and 2019, 95 male cougars were in their quota. 72 females were in their quota. That's 167 versus 132 now, and we've extended the area to almost double what it was when the NDP were in power. Previous to that, 86 males, 69 females. I'll tell you what, Madam Chair, mature male cougars on the landscape are important to have. And with this kind of mismanagement that was happening when the NDP were in power, that's mismanagement. We talk about the Minister's Special Licenses. Minister's Special Licenses raising $1.2 million a year to go to wildlife management in this province right here. $1.2 million. That's good money going to a good cause right here in this province. Now, we're talking about all the emails, the members talking about the emails she's receiving. Well, there's no wonder they're receiving so much emails, because they're providing so much, the NDP are providing so much misinformation to the public that people are getting upset. But if they knew the truth, they would probably understand a lot better what's going on. Now, it seems like when people are elected in this place, it seems like the members opposite, if they have some sort of professional accreditation previous to it, they take that hat off and they put on an orange hat. And that orange hat is all about being NDP and all about being activists and not talking about common sense of what needs to be done. And I always get a kick out of the members opposite talking about conflict of interest. Madam Chair, the Ethics Commissioner has allowed me to make the decisions I'm making specifically. We have a letter stating that. The members opposite know that. They keep bringing it up because it's all about smearing people, and it's not about doing anything properly. It's not about operating with science. It isn't talking about doing the right things for Albertans. It's all about smearing people. And I find that actually reprehensible. And I agree that all Albertans feel that managing wildlife properly is important to them. It doesn't matter if they only see wildlife once a week or once a month when they drive out of a big city and see an animal standing on the side of the road, they appreciate that. And I want to make sure that they can do that. Not just the hunters and not just the trappers, not just the people that go out and are hiking in the outdoors or live in the farming areas that are seeing wildlife regularly, but the people that only get out once in a while. They deserve, and they need to see the wildlife and be able to appreciate it, because you don't appreciate things that you don't see. So Madam Chair, the amendment was a horrible amendment. It was irresponsible amendment. And this bill, it brings a lot of balance back to the Wildlife Act and modernizes things. And I expect that we should have good support on this bill moving forward. Thank you.
Any other members to Bill 41? The Honourable Member for Banff-Kananaskis.
Well, Madam Speaker, this feels like it's actually turning into a little bit of a back and forth debate. So thank you, Minister, for that. So here's a quote from a cougar biologist. Recent changes to cougar management in Alberta, instituted by the Minister of Forestry and Parks, my apologies, are not supported by Alberta's existing cougar management framework or current scientific information. Changes appear to be driven by anecdotal information from stakeholders with vested interest in hunting both cougars and their prey, all of which are contrary to accepted scientific information currently available. The changes have the potential to reduce Alberta's cougar population, contrary to the Cougar Management Plan's stated objective to maintain a stable population of at least 1,500 cougars. That news release I spoke about that came out earlier today, Madam Speaker, from these organizations asking the minister to rescind these policies contains 35 pages of quotes just like that from biologists in Alberta reputing the minister's claims that his recent decisions on hunting and trapping are based in science. I personally also really don't like this idea that I put on some kind of ideology hat when I come into this room, Madam Speaker. I am a wildlife biologist. I have a PhD in wildlife biology. I went to school for a very long time to be able to stand in this room to say that, and it's pretty offensive to insinuate otherwise. 35 pages of data, Madam Speaker, about wolverines, fishers, lynx, river otters, grizzly bears, mountain goats, cougars, all of which are decisions that the minister has made in the last year increasing hunting and trapping limits. None of those decisions are based on the best available science. The best available science changes over time, Madam Speaker. That's why it's important that we continually update our decisions based on the best available science. because we continually learn more. And on this side of the house, we value learning. And we value this idea of continual learning, continuing to update and inform policy and wildlife management decision-making. I don't need to go back and forth on how great this amendment was or how whatever the minister perceives it to be. I want to say that the important thing is that we're not using science to inform wildlife management decisions. It will have negative implications for wildlife populations across the province. The minister is obligated to protect wildlife populations through his decisions. That is literally his job, and he is not doing it. And in terms of the conflict of interest piece, Madam Speaker, that's not coming from me. That's coming from constituents who are concerned about this minister's direct ties to the hunting and trapping community and how all of the decisions that he makes directly benefits the hunting and trapping community. That's not coming from me. That's coming from constituents, and it's my job to represent them in this House, and I feel like I have done that. Thank you.